There are still a few people who are trickling in, but I think we will get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jack Butterworth. I am the head of the Grants and Funding Office at the National Archives, and it is absolutely wonderful to see so many of you here this morning. We have 117 people and counting on the call, and something like 200 who express an interest. So it's really, really wonderful to see such an interest in the Cataloguing Grants scheme, and thank you all very much for coming along. Before we start, I've just got a couple of bits of housekeeping to do. First of all is to let you know that this webinar is going to be recorded. My presentation, James's presentation, are going to be recorded. It will be put up on YouTube afterwards, but we're not going to record the Q&A section at the end, so you can kind of speak freely once we get to the more interactive bits. Please do feel free to put any questions you have in the chat while the presentations are ongoing, but we won't take your questions until the end of both presentations, and we've got the slightly more interactive bit at the end. What we will do, though we're not going to record the Q&A, is put up written answers to all of the questions which we answer this morning on our website within the next few days or weeks. So if you do ask a question, or you do leave a question in the chat and we don't manage to get round to it, don't worry, you will be able to see a written answer on our website soon after this webinar finishes. So to kick things off, James Hodgson, my colleague, our head of archive sector funding, is going to do the majority of this morning's presentation. But just to start things off, I wanted to give everybody who's on the call a little bit of general context to our work and to where the cataloguing grants sit in our work right now and going forward. And thank you. So some of you might have heard this news already, but to anyone who hasn't, there has been a little bit of structural change at the National Archives, and in November of last year, TNA established a new grants and funding office, which I joined the National Archives to lead. And my team has been established with the intention of creating new directions for our funding programs for the archive sector, for liaising with other funders, some with whom you'll be familiar, to attract more funding to the archive sector as a whole, to advocate for the amazing work that all of you do, as well as to continue to administer the grants programs that we have done for the past few years. So there are 5 of us in our team. You can see us there in that little photo I've included on the slide. And we are taking a new strategic approach to funding within the National Archives as part of our sector leadership offer. A big piece of that new strategic direction has been in consulting with all of you. I know that many of you on the call will have responded to a survey that was run in August and September about funding for the archive sector, about our grants programs, and thank you immensely to everyone who took the time to contribute to that. We had 125 responses from different institutions around the sector, and that has been incredibly valuable data sets to us in terms of guiding our funding for next year and beyond, and making the case for funding of the archive sector to other institutions. So thank you for that. And there are going to be some changes both to the what of what we fund, but also to the how and how we fund things. One of the things that came out in that survey and has come out in our kind of interactions with all of our grantees is that you want funding to be simple, to be readily accessible, and to be clear. And we very much share that ambition. So as James is going to explain, we have made some changes to the cataloguing grants this year that we hope will make them work for you. The overriding intention has been to make the process simpler, to ask fewer questions of you, to make the process less time intensive. We did ask in our survey how long people were spending on their cataloguing grants applications, and we were quite stunned by the results. You know, some people spending 30, 40, 50, even up to 100 hours on a cataloguing grants application. That to us is too much. We don't want to suck your time out, and especially when when things are so pressured as they are at the moment. So we've made a number of changes to the process this year to try and make it more streamlined, more easy, and to make it less time intensive for you to access funding from us. And James will go into the detail of some of those changes over the course of his presentation. And finally, that survey and all of the other engagement we've been doing will help shape what we're going to fund starting next year. We want to build schemes that are really responsive to the needs of the sector, that take account of where we all are with reference to the cost of living, the price of everything, the challenges that are facing archive services everywhere. And so as of next year, the next government financial year in next April, we'll be launching a slightly refreshed approach to funding with some change schemes, some new schemes, and for the first time, a kind of single presentation of all of our funding schemes together, which I hope makes it really clear to anyone who's interested in receiving funding from the National Archives that at the touch of a button, you can see what we're interested in, you can see how to access these funding, and if you are interested in making a grant application to us, then hopefully that will be a very, very easy, very clear and very streamlined process. That's still very much work in progress, but we hope to share some of those new directions with you starting in the beginning of next calendar year, and particularly with a view to launching our new funding programs next spring. So watch this space. I'm going to hand over to James now. He's going to do some more of the detail on this year's cataloguing grants themselves. But if you have any questions about the general direction or anything I've just said, then we'll pick them up in the Q&A at the end. Welcome once again, James, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to see so many of you joining us today, and would like to say thank you for giving up your time on a Friday morning to hear more about our granting. I'm going to talk a bit about what the cataloguing grants are, who can apply for our cataloguing grants, how you would apply for our cataloguing grants, and then at the end we'll run through the questions that we will ask in the first phase of the application process. To start with, the cataloguing grants are part of our Archives Revealed funding programme. The Archives Revealed funding programme is a partnership that we deliver with our colleagues at the Pilgrim Trust and the Wolfson Foundation. It's the only funding stream in the UK dedicated to cataloguing and unlocking archives. And what we do is we provide annually grants up to £45,000 that will enable archives to create catalogues of important archival collections. One thing I should say is we will also make this presentation available online with the recording of the webinar. So any links in the presentation, you'll be able to follow once it's up and online. The Archives Revealed Cataloguing Grant Programme has run since 2017, and in that time we funded 44 cataloguing projects. As Jack mentioned, we launched a survey for the sector over the summer, and within that survey we asked organisations to prioritise what they would like us to be funding. Cataloguing was a clear leader of archives' wants from funding, and I think the number of people who've attended today only reflects and supports the need for this in the sector. The cataloguing grants are a highly competitive fund. Only about 15% of people applying or organisations applying will ultimately receive funding. The aims and why we provide these grants. We have 5 aims of the Archives Revealed programme, and this is what we really want to achieve by providing funding and really unlocking archives, getting collections that we know live in boxes, are on shelves, out, understood, catalogued, and then more accessible to interested people and the public. The 5 aims of the Cataloguing Revealed programme are significance. We're looking to make significant collections accessible to national and local audiences, those that would otherwise remain hidden. We're also aiming to be a diverse or an inclusive and a responsible funder by looking for projects that consider diversity and inclusion. One of the purposes of the fund is, as I mentioned, to get things out of boxes, off shelves, and to be used. So to do that, we look at how the cataloguing project will improve access, audiences, and engagement with the collection. We're aiming to increase the visibility and use of archive collections across a varied audience. And really, we're looking for collections, or we're looking to tell the stories of the collections, the experiences of the people, communities, and events contained within the archives. We believe that archives are important, and part of the cataloguing grants is to highlight the value of archives and how they make a real difference to people's lives. Finally, we look to fund projects that represent examples of excellence in cataloguing and discovery by considering standards and approaches to cataloguing. To apply for the cataloguing grants, we have a 2-phased application process. As Jack mentioned, we listened to the results of the funding survey, and we heard that archives are incredibly busy, resources are tight at the moment, and we have responded to that by reducing the phase 1 application process. We are making it a much more light touch application than in previous years, and we are looking to reduce the time that you and your archive need to spend on applying. So we have considered the key areas that we would like to understand from you when you are applying for a fund, and these are the areas that we will assess the first phase application on. The 5 areas are your organisation, the collection that will be catalogued, why the collection is significant, the potential audience for the collection, and the proposed approach to cataloguing and budget. There are direct questions to each of these goals, and we will explore the questions later on in the presentation with some ideas and suggestions for areas for you to consider when writing your application. As mentioned before, it's an incredibly competitive fund, and on average, about 30% of people applying at the phase 1 stage are invited to the second phase of application. This is usually around 20 applicants. The second phase of the application process is one in which we ask applicants to give a much more detailed outline of their proposed project. This is a much longer application, and the reason it's longer is so that we can make the most informed choice, but also we want to only ask applicants that stand a really high chance of receiving funding to complete the full lengthy application. At this stage, we ask direct questions about how the project aligns with the aims of the fund, exploring the significance and use of the collection, diversity and inclusion, audiences, engagement and improvement to access, the impact and value of the archive and the collection to be catalogued, the approach to cataloguing and cataloguing standards, as well as looking at project management and staffing. At this stage, around half of those people and organisations who have been invited to submit a phase 2 application will receive funding, and usually this is 8 or 9 projects. So to talk a little bit about who can apply for the fund and the eligibility requirements we ask for. Because we're a publicly funded organisation, we can fund public sector bodies, registered charities, or other not-for-profit organisations. We do welcome partnership applications as well as consortium and consortia bids. The fund is open to organisations within the United Kingdom that hold collections in England, Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, we're unable to fund profit-making organisations or private individuals. Applicants and funded organisations must have access to professional archival expertise from a qualified archivist. And we can fund organisations that hold both owned and/or deposited collections. For collections that have been deposited with your archive, we ask for a guarantee of public access for 10 years following the completion of the grant. This is normally through a letter from the depositor expressing their understanding that the collection will be accessible for 10 years after the grant. The costs that we can consider when we are making these awards, we have a limited budget, unfortunately, for the granting. And so we look to fund only costs that directly relate to the cataloguing of collections. We therefore may comment on your application about eligible and ineligible costs and would reserve the right to partially fund proposals. We can fund staffing costs that are directly required to undertake the project. This could be employing new project staff or backfilling for existing staff who are allocated to the project. However, we won't support an approach that uses existing staff to undertake the project, but does not backfill their roles because it would leave gaps within the service or archive. We ask that you use the Archives and Record Association's recommendations on professional salary levels. And as mentioned, this presentation will be put online and you can follow the link in this slide to find out what those are. The activities that Archives Revealed cannot fund include the acquisition of specialist cataloguing software, the conservation of archives, the digitization of archives, public engagement activities, and the cataloguing of non-archive collections. Now, the most interesting bit maybe. This is the questions that we will ask you on the phase 1 expression of interest application form. These first 5 questions are just very administrative, so I'll go quickly through them. And they're not part of the assessment, they're just really questions that we need to know so we know who you are when you're applying. The first question asks for who the applicant, organisation or organisations for partnerships or consortium bids are. The second question is the address of the applicant organisation, and for consortium or partnership applications, this should be the address of the lead applicant. The third question is the contact name of details. And as above, we would be asking for the lead organisation's contact name and details so that we're able to communicate directly with you, but you're welcome to include partners as needed. The fourth question is related to those eligibility requirements I mentioned earlier, and it asks whether your organisation is a public sector body, a registered charity, or another not-for-profit organisation. If you are going to be clicking the none of the above option, it is worthwhile contacting us at the National Archives before making your application to confirm your eligibility. The fifth question is whether the collection to be catalogued is owned by the holding archive or if it is a deposited collection. Again, if it is a deposited collection, we would ask for the evidence of public access at this stage. Now, the much bigger questions that I will spend a little more time on are the questions that we will assess when you're making your application. There are 6 assessment questions, 4 of them on this page, 2 of them on the next. The first question, or question 6, is asking you to describe your organisation and how you will access professional archival advice. This question relates to how your archive service will provide appropriate staffing to successfully deliver the cataloguing project, and how the archive collection can be supported with professional advice after the project has been completed. Here you might like to think about the history and governance of your organisation, what your organisation's missions and aims are, and where in the organisation the archive is managed. If you're applying as a partnership or consortium applicant, you might like to consider speaking a little about how the partnership was created, whether it's a new partnership or if you have previously collaborated on other projects. Question 7 is asking for a brief overview of the collection to be catalogued and why you have prioritised this collection for cataloguing. Here we are looking for a description of the collection that you're proposing to catalogue. Some areas that would be useful if you can include in your answer to this question would be the subject of the collection. It might be an archive related to a person, organisation, place, or an event. What type of collection it is, whether it's a paper, a film, or a digital records collection. The size of the collection, and here you can measure it in traditional measures, how many boxes, the linear meters, cubic meters, or for digital collections, the size in gigabytes. Where the collection comes from and the source of the records contained in the archive. They might be minutes, correspondence, deeds, maps, photographs, oral histories, etc. You might also like to talk about the time that the record covers. Finally, please do explain why you've chosen the specific collection to be catalogued, and make sure that throughout your application, the focus of your description is on what you would like to be catalogued. Whilst you can reference your wider collection, we will be assessing the collection that you are proposing for cataloguing rather than the wider collection in your archives. Question 8 is talking about significance and asking you to describe how your collection is significant. Significance is an interesting topic, and we take a fairly broad brush approach to its meaning. We are looking for collections that are important, that have meaning, that tell a significant. The goal of the programme is to ensure that significant archives collections that represent the lives and perspectives of people throughout the UK are made accessible for the public for research and enjoyment. We're trying to make sure that these collections that otherwise would remain hidden are accessible to the nation as well as local audiences. Some ideas you might like to think about when exploring significance would be, do you know anything about who created the collection or how it's been used before? Is the person who created it of particular interest to your community or the public? Does it link to particular events or a unique theme that's of interest? You might like to explore how unique or rare the collection is. What is it about the collection that makes it different to other collections of a similar type or topic? Why is it a standout collection? Are collections like this rarely available for research or engagement? Or is it contributing to telling the story of the materials contained in the collection? Is it an unusual collection? Is it intact or complete? Is there anything about the condition of the collection that would make it important or of more significance? One area that's really important to explore is whether the collection is linked to people. Is it linked to a specific person, a group, an organization, a place or a community that has real kind of cultural, historic or scientific significance? And that also translates into the audience. Who are the audience and why is the story that's contained in the collection significant for them? Finally, you might like to consider, and if possible, evidence the demand for the collection. You might not know because it's not catalogued, and therefore, if people don't know it exists, you might not be getting inquiries, but you probably will know the theme of the collection. And you can evidence whether or not you get many inquiries on this theme, and what those inquiries are related to. Are you getting a lot of researchers inquiring? Are community groups interested in the collection? Does it have a special scientific purpose that researchers are interested in knowing more about? The last question on this page, and then we have two more on the following page, is about the intended and potential audience for the collection. Through this funding, we aim to increase the visibility and use of archives collections that would otherwise remain hidden. We are looking to tell the stories of an experience of people, communities, and events. Within this question, we do consider your approach to diversity and inclusion, as well as engaging new audiences for your across the sector. Some ideas that you might like to consider would be, have you considered the existing audience, but also the potential wide-ranging audience? How will doing the project impact and improve how the collection is accessed and used? If you're applying for a partially listed collection, how will a full cataloging project improve access to this collection? And what resources, commitments, and plans does your organization currently have or planning to have to engage audience with the collection once it has been catalogued? Again, you can look at whether or not your collection speaks to or has opportunities for engagement with audiences that are traditionally underrepresented or underengaged in archive and heritage collections. You can also consider how to involve the community, whether that's the community represented by the collection or the community that would engage with the collection. Some ideas around this might be volunteering, asking people represented by the collection to come in and help co-create catalogues. You could consider the idea of steering groups and whether or not having the voices of the users and those represented or those with connections to the collection as part of the leadership team for the use and continued use of the collection. Throughout this, we're looking for an inclusive approach. So if you are recruiting volunteers or a steering group, have you used an inclusive and open approach to engagement there? Apologies, I just skipped a couple of slides. The last two questions we will ask are question 10, the approach to cataloguing standards that you will adopt. As mentioned, we're looking to fund projects that show excellence in cataloguing and making collections discoverable. And some ideas you might like to consider here are which standards of cataloguing and discovery you will follow, and why these standards are the appropriate ones for the type and format of the collections. We do have more information available about cataloguing standards for archives on our website. Again, this will be linked to in the guidance documents available on our website. We'd like to consider here, are you using a traditional, are you doing it the same way you've always catalogued, or is there scope with this project to a more innovative or novel approach? Both the answers are fine, but we would like to understand why you are making the decisions that you have made. There is distinct guidance for various materials available. So if your collection was a film or audiovisual material, there are some guidances available on Film Archives UK. If it was a born digital collection, the Digital Preservation Coalition also has some guidance. Again, these links will be available on our website in the guidance documents we publish. Really here, we're looking just quite simply to understand why you've chosen your selected approach and how that will contribute to a successful cataloguing of the collection. The final question we'll ask is for you to provide a brief estimate of the total amount of funding you're requesting. At this stage, we are not expecting a detailed breakdown of project costs. We would like them, well, we would expect them to be reasonable and thought through, but we're not looking for quotations or supporting documents that confirm your costings. The one area we certainly would be looking at in relation to is it an appropriate and reasonable cost would be the salaries that I mentioned earlier, and we would like that referenced or guided by the ARA pay recommendation pay scale. Here, we would like to know how much you are requesting from the Archive Revealed Cataloguing Grant Programme, how much the overall project will cost, whether or not you're able to provide match funding, and that's both in cash support that your organisation or partners would provide, but also in kind support. In kind support includes things like volunteer time, management support, technical support, and materials. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we don't currently support full economic cost recovery, but we will fund additional staff costs required to deliver the project as long as the roles, as long as if existing staff are used to deliver the project, that their roles are costed and backfilled, so it doesn't affect your service delivery. Finally, if you would like to find out more about the grants, oh, sorry, no, I should start. The grant's open today. There's a link below, and that link will be put on the website as soon as possible. There is quite a long application period. We've opened it until Friday the 10th of February. And really that's motivated by two things. Firstly, we understand that there is a break over the Christmas period when many archives will be closed. So we don't want to ask people to be working over a holiday period. But also we have heard from the survey that we sent out just how busy you all are. We understand that there are real pressures to continue to deliver business as usual. Often grant applications are an addition to normal work. So we wanted to allow you plenty of time to complete your applications in hopefully a relaxed and manageable manner. The application form is available from our website. The link is there and that will be published online. I would really recommend that you visit our funding pages. You will see the cataloguing grants, but you will also see the other grants that we offer, including the second part of the Archives Revealed funding, which is scoping grants. On our website, we will publish this webinar. We'll publish the frequently asked questions. We have a fuller question by question guidance document. And we also have examples of the projects that we previously funded since the grant opened, in case you would like inspiration or ideas about what it is we are funding. Finally, if you have any questions that we don't answer in the next next Q&A session, please do feel free to get in contact with us. The email shown on screen is a email address looked at by our grants and funding team, so monitored throughout the working day, and we should get back to you pretty quickly after your email with an answer to your question, or if necessary, or if wanted, we can certainly have a chat. You can speak to me or other colleagues.